Welcome to Beyond Names. I'm Dr. Habīb. This is a space for spiritual seekers and soulful misfits, for the curious and the committed, for those grounded in a tradition, and for those who are not sure what they believe. Whether you call the divine Allah, Yahweh, Elohim, Brahman, higher power, or you're still searching for language that fits, you are welcome here. Together, we'll explore the intersection of spirituality and daily life, the wisdom of many traditions, and the ways we return to our true selves, to our source, to the light that we carry within. I'm so glad you're here. Let's begin with an introduction to our guest for this episode. Aliye, you are the host of Cooking from Scratch podcast. You are inspiring others to create nourishing from scratch meals that heal the body and the soul. You yourself have been a professional chef and are professionally trained, and you on your podcast uh, engage in conversation with others who are chefs, who are health coaches, doctors, nutritionists, so on and so forth. Um, and you also are a certified facilitator in spiritual literacy and transformative practices. And you incorporate spiritual practices like hospitality and gratitude and presence and listening into your cooking, into, I believe, your relationship with food.
Yes, absolutely.
and and people can find out more about you at soulspacechef.com.
Yes,
So
that is
yeah.
it. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you would just tell us a little bit about your spiritual story as a way of letting us get to know you and get to know a little bit about you.
Oh man, how much time do we have? Let's see. My spiritual story, I mean, it's multifaceted, definitely. But as related to food, I will say that it started with a health diagnosis that I received when I was a teenager. When I was instructed, it was an autoimmune kidney condition, and I was instructed to eat a different way. I watched your sodium intake. That was about it. This was in the early 90s, so there wasn't a lot of known about this autoimmune condition. Eat more sodium, eat less sodium. You may have to have a kidney transplant when you're older. That's what I was told. And so I started cooking basically because I was eating canned soups and more processed food. So I started paying attention more to what I was eating. And
Mhm.
that's what really got me into cooking. And then I started to realize how much I actually really loved to cook. And that's what started me on that, from in retrospect, very much that path of cooking. Um, it also connected me to my heritage. So my father was Turkish, and I grew up eating, my mom's American, but I
Mhm.
grew up eating a lot of, she learned how to cook a lot of traditional Turkish foods. So I grew up eating a lot of traditional Turkish foods, but also a lot of very traditional American foods. So from a cultural and I believe spiritual perspective, learning to cook also helped connect me to that, just what I had always grown up with that I had never thought of as something separate from me. It was just who I was. My father was half Turkish, my mom was American. I was raised in California. That's just how it was. But again, in retrospect, I have come to see that this has been the greater part of my bigger spiritual journey in general. Because connecting to your culture, I think, is definitely a part of connecting to your spirit and your spirituality. And my dad was Sufi too, which is, I think, part of the connection that you and I have as well. A lot of your teachings are very familiar with for me in that way. That's the best way to describe it. Just a lot of the things that you talk about were
Mhm.
infused with how I was raised, if that makes sense. A lot of
Mhm.
the teaching stories. Um, so yeah, I think that's the short answer of the spirituality. And then as I've even gone on, I mean, this was when I was a teenager, right? So this was 30 plus years ago.
Yeah.
And then I went on to pursue a career in food, but also always searching for that component. I didn't want to just be a chef in a restaurant. that was always lacking for me. I didn't just want to go to
Mm.
work and come home. There was this deeper component to cooking that included nourishment and culture and healing. And as you can see from my podcast, I love to talk to people about it. I'll interview chefs. I interview people who health is the reason that they cook. There's so many aspects to food and how it brings us together that I don't see it as anything else besides spiritual because I view life as this big spiritual journey, and all that stuff, the culture, the health, all of it is all just one big happy journey in there. So is that a good answer? I mean, that's my,
I like that you call it a happy journey.
yeah, I mean, it
That's
doesn't always feel happy, but at this point in my life, I mean, it's a messy journey for sure, but
yeah.
I think it's a happy journey
A messy, happy
as
journey.
well.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
definitely, definitely.
I can definitely relate to the messy and the happy both.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
At this point in our lives, yeah, I know I'm just grateful for what has been given to me along the way, you know. Talk to me in my 20s or 30s, maybe I wouldn't feel the same way. But now that I've reached a point where I'm at, it's like, no, this is actually one big, beautiful mess, and I love it.
Yeah, great,
I love it.
wonderful. It's good to hear. Yeah,
Yeah,
that you have
yeah,
embraced the big, wonderful mess.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So one of the things that I have held as an intention with this podcast is to make spirituality accessible to everyone. And part of that is just I'm not alone in having that experience of feeling like I didn't fit into a space. You know,
Yeah,
like many
yeah,
of us have that experience of feeling like, oh, I don't feel it fit in my family, or I don't fit in this church, or I don't fit in this synagogue, or I don't fit in this mosque, or like just we've had that experience of feeling like we didn't fit in. So I feel
yeah,
like it's almost more like that's the more common experience than
yes,
fitting in
yes,
experience is the less common,
yes,
and that feeling like you don't is the
yeah,
more common. So
yes,
part of my intention is like saying, hey, you don't have to necessarily fit in a place that you associate with spirituality. Like
hmm,
really, you can engage in spirituality outside of that, and in fact, in relation to any part of your life, there's an
yeah,
opportunity to engage in spirituality. So that's all of a part of me saying, one, if with this intention of like making spirituality accessible to anyone, can you do you mind sharing like where you are, like where you locate yourself in relation to a tradition or not tradition?
mm,
Because my intention is to invite and have guests from people who consider themselves maybe spiritual but not religious, people who
hmm,
consider themselves devout, people who consider themselves exploring, people who consider
yeah,
themselves, located in a tradition and not. So it's my intention to have all of
yes,
that as part of the
yes,
conversation
yes,
to open up the conversation. So
yeah.
part one is just saying, do you feel comfortable, or asking, do you feel comfortable with telling us about like where you locate yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. This is interesting. So, I think for a long time, I felt really self conscious that I did not have a particular known way I could identify myself spiritually. I'm like, well, I'm not Christian. I
Mhm.
wasn't raised Christian. I'm not familiar with that really at all. Christian was Christmas with my family. I mean, there was no Christianity actually involved
Yeah.
besides Christmas. But then, like I said, I was raised by a father who was Sufi, but I didn't ever read a Quran. The Sufism was stories. And in Turkey, it's Hoja is the mullah, you know, the
Mhm.
unlucky fool who does all the things that teaches us all the things we need to know. So my life was growing up was infused with these Hoja stories and actually comic books. We had these comic books from Turkey that were actual like, you know, like drawn comic books about with these Hoja stories in them. So that was the infusion in my life, but I didn't realize it was religious, quote unquote. And I didn't know as a child it was spiritual. It wasn't until I started studying these things later and coming across Sufi teachings. And my dad passed away 20 years ago. So unfortunately, this isn't the type of thing I can't talk to him about this stuff. Since I've had kind of my awareness into this spirituality, I haven't been able to speak with him physically about this type of stuff. So what I'm doing is I'm taking that stuff, they're very much feelings and memories from my childhood. And then it's almost like sometimes it's a matching game. I'll come across teachings from you or other Sufi scholars that I relate to the Sufi teachings a lot. And I'm not sure if it's because of my upbringing. There's a certain language or feeling, because I don't know much about even the religions as the basics of religions. I know embarrassingly little about Islam or Christianity or any of them, but it's this feeling that I get from certain traditions that attracts me towards them. And Sufism is one that I am always attracted towards in terms of, I guess, it just feels comfortable. How do I describe it? It feels kind of accepting to me.
Yeah.
It feels, I don't have words for this. It feels whole, like it feels healing when I'm connected to these types of the Sufi sort of stories and things that I read continually.
Yeah.
But if you were to ask me, what religion are you? I don't think I would name one because I don't feel comfortable that I don't know these details of the religions. You know, I know the feelings of the religions. And I'm very much, as a chef, this is very obvious. I'm very much in touch with my senses. So the things that draw me towards things are sound, my five senses, basically. And the sound, smell, sight. Like in my house, you can't see it, but I have Arabic writing of the different things around my house. And I have Islamic geometry stuff. You can see this one right here.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
this is what I surround myself with because it's what I'm comfortable with. So the answer of what spiritual but not religious, definitely.
Yeah. Great.
But I don't know. I prayer beads are one of my favorites. Chanting is one of my favorites. But again, it comes back to this the senses. I'm always really engaged with my senses, and I grew up playing music, and that always brings me back home to source is my senses. And that's how I ground myself always, is through these types of things. Cooking has become the career, but music is also a huge part of my life.
Yeah.
So that was a roundabout answer, but
That's great. It's
that's what
perfect.
I got.
Yeah. So SBNR, meaning spiritual,
Yes.
not religious,
Yes.
and that you find yourself attracted to Sufism, which is beautiful.
That, and
Yeah.
you know what's interesting now that I'm realizing this, I have a very close friend who's Christian, and very entrenched in Christian teachings. And I would never thought in 1,000 years I would have been friends with her. But we have a lot to talk about because we think about spirituality we think about a lot of the same things. We've raised our family in really similar ways with really similar values. So, and even though she believes Jesus Christ is her Lord and Savior, she is still absolutely open and willing to talk to me and hear what I have to say, and with an openness. Like we find commonalities there. And that's what I really am passionate about, is talking to people about different commonalities between different traditions as well. Like when I was in the, the spiritual literacy class for that year with you, every week I'd go to her and I'd be like, okay, this is what we talked about. And she was like waiting for me to come tell her what I learned, like she's like, oh, okay, well, in the Bible it says this. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh, cool. I learned this. And we could just talk for hours about this stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, spiritual but not religious is the short answer
Wonderful.
to
Wonderful.
that.
And I'm so glad that you have a Christian friend that you can engage with.
Yeah,
And I
she's
say so
incredible.
many times that I'm people theologians who go through the process of going through the academic environment,
Right.
but then come out of it saying, I'm really not interested in talking about theology.
Right. Right.
I'm really interested in talking about like what feeds your heart,
Right.
like
Exactly.
what do we have in common?
Yeah.
Like what
Yeah.
enlivens you and brings you a sense of joy and a sense of connection to what's
Yeah.
most meaningful to you, you
And I
know.
think that's what we
Yeah,
connected over. Like there was a
yeah,
period of time when I'd go to church with her every Sunday, and I was like, what am I doing? How am I going to church? And she was like, no, come to church with me. And I'd go, and she was part of these really large mega church where singing is a big, and it starts with this band playing like every Sunday. And
Yeah.
I would go and I would be so uncomfortable, like, what am I doing here? But then that band would play and I was like, I am here. Like I was so into it. And I felt sort of uncomfortable because I knew I wasn't going to accept Jesus Christ as my savior, like I
Yeah.
knew that wasn't what was going to happen. But just back to my senses, the music and the being surrounded by these people, and even my friend who, she knows how to worship. That's all I have to say. Like just being next
Yeah.
to her worshiping in
Yeah.
this environment was so inspiring to me.
Mm,
I don't know
beautiful.
how else to describe it. I still get chill. I still remember the first drum beat that like hit. I didn't know what I was walking into.
Yeah.
And it's like a stage and there's a huge drum kit. I mean, it's like a rock show to get people going for the first 10 or 15 minutes. And I still remember like that drum beat. And I was like, oh man, this is so good. I get it. Again, like those using those senses to move you,
It's
that's definitely is effective for me.
yeah. I love that you bring up the senses because, as you know, I'm all about the chanting.
Right.
I
Right.
love the chanting. And
Yes.
and so in Islam, there's the idea that the holy texts, the holy books like the Quran and the uh, Gospels that were revealed to Jesus and the Torah that was revealed to Moses and so on, that it's not just that the words have meaning, but there's also a light and a sound. And so it's and when uh, when Muslims recite or when Sufis chant, it's
Yeah.
about opening opening to not only to the meaning, but it's like opening the heart to receive the light and the meaning that comes into it. And the sound is a means of that opening process. Like
Yeah.
the sound is a means of increasing the receptivity to the light, the receptivity to the meaning. So I
Yeah.
love that you're talking about the senses because
That
it,
makes so much sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because I feel like religions aren't really taught that way. They're very focused on the word and the actual, just literal word. Like I had never experienced anything before the class with you, and then one of my cohort members was a Buddhist, right? And so I learned at the same time you're chanting, and then in meeting with her in the class every week, her Buddhist teachings were very powerful. She had all the voice stuff that she did, and if religion had been presented that way to me as a child, I think it would have been a different story,
yeah,
right? But I don't. It just wasn't really presented to me as religion. It was just
yeah.
it was completely different, like I said before. But yeah,
That's why
that's
I
so
relate.
beautiful. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so beautiful. And I think that's why what cooking comes down to for me. That's why, like cooking, I've always felt a very divine connection with doing things with my hands and transforming ingredients into dishes. Like I find that to
mhm,
be a very divine process. And even from, I used to own a produce delivery company. I would go to the farm and I would choose the produce and I would deliver it to people's homes. And then I would try to teach them how to make it via recipes or whatever. But that
yeah,
entire process I found to be a devotional practice.
mm,
Every week for 9 years, I was at that farmer's market talking to those farmers who, to me, they were the ones who were looking after the earth. They were the ones
mhm,
cultivating, drawing that magic out, that stuff out of the earth that we could eat. And
yeah.
then I was passing it along. So just another non-conformist way of finding connection with the divine right there. And that when I'm feeling unmotivated or whatever with cooking too, I also like to turn to that for the gratitude
Yeah,
aspect of it. I mean, that is what I'm talking about really, is the gratitude. And that was one of my most powerful first experiences in the spirituality literacy classes. It might have been devotion, or thanking the hands that brought those items to me. It completely shifted how I was feeling in that moment. I could feel it from, ugh, I gotta make dinner, to remembering the hands that literally brought me this thing I'm holding, whoever grew it or
Yeah.
slaughtered it or whatever any of it was. It just completely shifts it for me. I don't know. That's why I find that is the magic of cooking right there.
Well, and I love that there's that awareness of the, if we choose to look at it this way, the awareness
Yes.
of the connection.
Yeah.
So, because from source to table,
Hmm.
like that there is sunlight and there is water and there
Yeah.
is air and there is earth, and then so
Mm.
there's the person who grew it and the person who picked it and the person who transported it and the person who stocked it and the person who,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just all of that. And if you from a perspective of, like, from a Sufi perspective, you would be like, we're all one, right? So it would be all
Right.
about the interconnectedness and the sort of embracing of the oneness that's behind all of the different steps in the process. So,
Absolutely.
so I wanted to back to the conversation. I do want to talk more about food and
Yeah.
cooking, but back
Yeah.
to sort of setting the intention and for the podcast and the conversation around spirituality in general. I wondered if you would speak to what spirituality means to you. Like, how do
Mm.
you think of
Right.
spirituality? Yeah.
Spirituality to me, I think if I could use one word, it would mean connection. That's the
Hmm.
word that I've just continually come back to again and again and again, both connection to a feeling of a higher power,
Hmm.
and then the connection, what you were just talking about, from a connection to the process. I'll just say that that's the shortest way to say it.
Hmm.
Feeling a connection to the grower, the anything and you have that's within a process.
Hmm.
um, that to me is the spirituality. It's the why behind all of it. um, it's just it's the we are one thing. It's the connection to that we all have, and it's what enables me to approach a stranger or somebody who I admire but I might be nervous to talk to. It's a reminder, like, we're all connected, and even if this person, maybe they're going to be rude to me or not want to hear what I have to say, that's fine. But I remember that connection that we all have, and when I approach with that type of thing, I tend to smile and I tend to be just happy that I'm able to talk to them. And I think that comes across, and I think that to me is spirituality, is connecting with people, places, things, everything. Just connection. And when I'm feeling not great in my life, sad, unhappy, it always comes down to disconnection. Always. Always.
Hmm.
I always come back and I'm like, gosh, why have you been focusing on that thing that's making you really angry, or this other thing that's really pissing you off? And then I'm like, oh man, I really haven't been feeling connected lately. Oh, how can we feel connected? Okay, let's try to find a practice that helps us feel connected. Or what is severing my connection? Maybe I'm ruminating on something I can't control that will sever my connection with anything divine or spiritually in an instant. And I don't even realize I'm doing it. And I'll do it for days and days and days at a time. And it's not until I make a conscious effort to be, okay, what's going on with you? Oh, I'm feeling disconnected. Okay.
Yeah.
And it always comes back to like a light in my heart type of thing, I'll say,
Mhm.
that I'll remember that I need to reconnect with. Yeah.
You may remember that I'm 99.9% sure that in the course, the spirituality course that I shared in one of the weeks, was saying that all pain is caused by the illusion of separation.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, I definitely remember that.
yeah. And then the to take that phrase and say, okay, well, what's the opposite of that then? If all pain is caused by the illusion of separation, so what's the opposite of pain? What's the opposite of illusion? What's the opposite of separation? And then we come to the idea of, like, where we are at home is in our connectedness.
Yeah.
That when we are, where our joy our peace comes from our state of connection. And so for a Sufi, that's connection to the divine. You know, for a theistic, excuse me,
Right.
my my text in Mississippi came out there from the theistic perspective. From a theistic perspective, that means your connection is to God. But
That's funny.
that's, and from a non-theistic perspective, that's the connection that's to your inner light. Like
Right.
how you might use language of source, or you might use the language of higher power, but you also might just use that in terms of like the inner wisdom, the inner strength,
Yes.
inner light. That uh, uh, it's so what you said. I just love it because there's actually some. No, I shouldn't say actually. There's so much wisdom
Yeah.
that is in what you said around, hey, why am I off? Oh, there's something I'm doing that's creating disconnection. And how can I restore my connection? So,
I learned this stuff from you. Now that you're saying all this is your notice and nurture practice that you taught us way back at the beginning. I'm remembering this. Yes, it was the notice and nurture. Notice what's off, nurture what needs to be nurtured. Yeah, that's
yeah.
absolutely that. Um, yeah. And that's also what's great about what I learned working with you too is that you helped give kind of words and validity to all these things I'd always been feeling. Like all this stuff I'm talking about, I'd always felt my entire life,
Mhm,
feelings of connection or disconnection, but they were just happiness or unhappiness or anger. And then that's where it stopped. It was just, I'm angry. I
mhm.
could barely describe it as anger. I would just be rah, reactive. But
Yeah.
then you being able to say, no, there's some validity to this. Notice, nurture, give yourself what you need. It was um, validity is the only word I have, but it was just very validating to have somebody be able to say, yes, these are valid feelings. And no, it doesn't necessarily require you being a part of a particular religion to be able to feel connected. Because that's, I think, um, a hesitation or kind of almost a shame or embarrassment I had my whole life. Like, I grew up in Southern California, so it was Christian by default, and kids went to church. And I always kind of felt like, well, why don't we go to church? I don't know. But then in the time period that I grew up here, we didn't have a Turkish community really that we were connected with. We didn't have a Sufi connection here in the States. So I was kind of in the middle of both worlds. I was getting this at home, but I wasn't going to church. And I just figured there wasn't anything for me. If I wasn't
Mhm.
A and I wasn't B, there wasn't anything else. And I really think it took and teach learning with you and in that class with you as a
Mhm.
teacher, like, oh, there is a way to have this spirituality and have this connection that's innate to
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
And I think that was so valuable for me and really helped propel me forward um, on my journey, my spiritual journey. Definitely. And what something like my podcast came out of, because it's weird. My podcast is weird. It's not just about cooking and it's not just about health. I want to talk about all the funny, like, there's some episodes on there. My last episode was called Gratitude and Protein. I'm like, this is weird, but do I care? No. Like, these are two things that make meals and health really the secrets to health and energy. I'm like, having gratitude is absolutely imperative for feeling good, and so is eating enough protein. So why don't we take an episode and do both? I have another one in there. It's about hospitality. That's a little bit more straightforward when it comes to cooking.
Yeah.
But this podcast was created out of that project that I did that connected food to all these different words, and some of them were just weird, but also I think so cool, like stuff you wouldn't necessarily think about,
Yeah.
connecting the two.
So would you mind speaking a bit more? Because we can throw words like gratitude and hospitality
Mm,
out there, and people
right,
don't necessarily connect to that with, oh,
right.
actually gratitude is a spiritual practice, or oh, hospitality is a spiritual practice.
Right.
So for the for the folks who haven't gone through a spiritual literacy course or
Right.
haven't
Right. Right.
necessarily grounded
Right.
themselves in that kind of language,
Right.
could you speak a bit more to that intersection for you of
Hmm.
spirituality and food,
Yeah.
spirituality in cooking, spirituality in your everyday?
Yeah. I mean, I think it just, for me, everybody I believe is given a thing. And my thing that was given to me in my presence on this earth is food and cooking. I've tried to ignore it. I've tried to quit it. I've tried all the things and I've always come back to it. And it's my mirror for what I'm meant to do here. So we'll take hospitality, for example. I view hospitality on a simple level. You might say, oh, it's like being nice to people. And especially if you're feeding them or it's giving them going above and beyond. But I really view hospitality like as radical acceptance, right? Because when it comes to hospitality, it's not just guests that come to your table. It's the Rumi poem, right? It's like all these emotions that come in, greet them at the door, however that poem goes, right? You greet them at the door smiling for whatever they may bring, and you have to accept them, or else they're just going to keep coming to your door and you're not going to understand why that they keep coming. Like, God, why does this keep, what's emotion of sadness, this emotion of whatever it is.
Yeah,
So greeting them with hospitality or like this radical acceptance of, oh, okay, you're here. There are guests you may not want. There are guests you may not have been expecting. They may be a guest you're ashamed of or don't approve of or any of it. But if you accept them and engage with them and offer them everything that you would offer anybody or anything else, it's a way of processing and healing. This is just what I know. I'm not a spiritual teacher, but these are the feelings, the experiences that I've had. And I've had people come to my table that I couldn't wait for them to leave. But I learned a lot from them while they were there, you know. Like,
yeah,
so that's in the literal sense.
yeah,
And I have emotions come into my table almost every day that I don't want there. I try to push away, but they get
yeah,
stronger if I try to push them away. You
yeah.
know, they don't process, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So that in short is the connection with cooking and spirituality is yeah, it's a mirror, it's a metaphor to
Mhm.
me for things that happen in your everyday life.
And I love that you brought up Rumi's poem, The Guest House.
A
Yeah,
guest house,
yeah,
that's
the
what it's
guest
called.
house around accepting, as you said, radical acceptance. So accepting all of your emotions and saying, hey, welcome here. And what's happening through you, Mr. Emotion, Miss Emotion? Like what's
Yeah,
happening? What's happening through you? And that's that radical acceptance you're talking about, and the willingness to, in the face of the guests that you don't want at your table, as well
exactly.
as the guests that you do want at the table, like
Yeah,
with all of them, instead of choosing to close the door, so to speak,
right.
but to say, hey, what what's there here for me? Like what's
Yeah,
there to learn through this? That one of the things that I love and also find very difficult to practice is to take every emotion and say, okay, every single thing I feel, no matter how dark it is or how wonderful it is an opportunity. It's either an opportunity to bring me closer to my ego self and my lower self, or it's an opportunity to bring me to my higher self, my true self. Like it's an opportunity for connection.
yes,
It's
absolutely.
an opportunity for disconnection, as
Yeah,
you mentioned earlier. So how do you be with what your emotional experience is and use it as, okay, let's go down the road to connection. So like how can I accept this emotion and work
yeah,
with the emotion to move through connection?
yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. And you're reminding me saying that in my podcast episode about gratitude. I made it a metaphor by saying, like, you're cooking something and you're out of an ingredient. What do? I'm like, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to go deeper into your creativity. It's an opportunity to do something you might not have done. It's an opportunity to order takeout. I mean, maybe that's not what you want to do, but in a silly way, a way to bring it around to also a way to practice gratitude. Oh, you're out of lemon. Well, I'm grateful for this opportunity to practice creativity right now. Or, okay, I really don't have all the ingredients. Oh, I'm grateful for this opportunity to put it all away and order a pizza. I don't know. Like, there's so many ways to look at it. And
because that's true, because absolutely there are times where we need rest and
yeah,
there's times where we need to be creative. So they're
yeah,
like, yeah,
exactly.
and
That's,
listening within
yeah,
and following that, yeah,
yeah,
comes from the radical acceptance and the hospitality that you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah,
And I love that you mentioned gratitude, because I think gratitude is one of those concepts in our culture that's talked about a lot, so much to the point that I think people can become numb to it. They think, oh, um, and yet it can be such a heart opening practice to
yeah,
continually orient ourselves to gratitude. And we can think about it in ways that sort of go beyond our traditional thinking or our cultural thinking. And an example of that is one of my spiritual teachers said that a symbol of gratitude, or a metaphor for gratitude, or a manifestation of gratitude, I'm not sure quite what's the best language for it, but is that a plant gives more than it's given. So
mm,
like the plant that the farmer tends, but produces more than it provides more nutrients than it received.
right,
Like it didn't necessarily get everything that it needed, but it still gives more than it got. Like it's manifesting gratitude in kind of a mystical way. For I'm not sure
right,
that's the best way to say it, but it's like, so we can, if we think about that, it's like talking about your relationship to the earth and the farmer and who grew this, and your sense of connection, and your relationship to food. Like even just something is like, yeah, I'm grateful for this apple. Like
yeah,
we can take a gratitude to a whole new level,
a new
depending
level.
on how deep we want to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Doesn't it change our brain chemistry too? Isn't that what's happening when we're like, don't we get some hit of like, because I feel it when it switches in my head. I'm like, first I felt ooh about this apple, and now I feel oh about this apple. Like, doesn't it change somehow chemistry in
You
your
get a
head?
little oxytocin or
Yeah,
some
something.
dopamine or something like
Yeah,
that. Um, it's probably oxytocin, like it's one of those connection biochemicals would be,
yeah,
based on how you talk about it and how you talk about spirituality and
yeah,
connection. Like I think for you, when you are in relationship with food, like for you, it's a connection practice. So
yeah.
it's probably one of those connection biochemicals where
Hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
which is which is wonderful. I mean, yeah,
I just like to think of the whole picture.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's great to think of the whole picture. So, also, I before we wind down,
Yeah, of course.
you did talk about connection, and you did talk about you mentioned I think you mentioned inner light, or you said something about the
Mm-hmm.
light within, or something that
Mm-hmm.
which is language that I use a lot too.
Yes.
So I wondered if do you have any favorites for when you
Mm.
notice you're not in connection, that you're feeling disconnection? Um, do you have any favorite ways for saying, hey, how do I restore my sense of connection? How do I
Yeah.
restore my sense of um, connection to the inner light, or accessing that place of,
Yeah.
yeah.
I do. I'm trying to pick one. I have these prayer beads right in front of me here, so they're like in my line of sight. So that's a big one, like I was talking about for chanting, and I tend to default actually to Buddhist chanting because that's what I
Mm,
learned first
yeah.
years ago. So chanting always brings me back to at least a place where I can feel more open to what's going on. A sense of openness to let in that connection. So that's a big one for me. Like I said, it incorporates the sound, but it also, at least when I do it, I'm really focusing on my breathing as well. So that's really a big one for me. And just also, I would say any kind of like dance or movement as well, because that helps me kind of get out of whatever stuckness I'm in. So even if as goofy as it feels, just waving my arms, just wildly moving sometimes is all I need to just get out of stuck, or just something more formal, going to a dance class or taking a dance class on YouTube or whatever it might be, you know. So body movement and sound, I guess, are kind of two of my big favorite ones.
Move that energy.
Yeah, exactly.
Through the body and through sound. I love it.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Buddhist practice that you'd be willing to, a Buddhist chant?
I'm like, I don't even really know what they mean. I'm embarrassed. So there's one I was taught either years ago or by Sheena. I don't remember. It's Om Mane Padme Hum. Do you know that one? I'm not even sure I know what it means.
Yeah.
And I'm like, am I saying it wrong? I'm embarrassed by it, but I barely know.
Om Mane Padme Hum.
Mm-hmm.
Om Mane Padme Hum.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a well-known chant.
Yes.
Do you want to do a few?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't do it nearly as well as you do. I can't chant in front of the chanter.
You can't run in front of me. Well, of course, because you just told us earlier that you were a chanter.
For myself.
For yourself. Okay, so you want to do some together?
Yeah, we can do it together.
All right, because I'm not an expert in Sanskrit by any means, so I'm not trying to translate it, but that phrase does have to do with unity, you know. It does have to do with wisdom, it has to do with compassion. So yeah. So let's do a few.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't have to do a lot, we can do it together. Okay.
I think I do it really fast. I don't think I'm supposed to do it so fast.
Yeah, so this is we're all perfectly different in our uniqueness, right? So you want to do a few fast and I'll do a few slow?
I don't know.
You don't know? You don't know what you want to do.
I'm not even sure. Let's see. Om Mane Padme Hum. I'm very methodical about it. So I have the beads, right? And so I'm just Om Mane Padme Hum, Om Mane Padme Hum. That's how I go through it. Om Mane Padme Hum, 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 Om Mane Padme Hum.
Great.
Yeah, that's how I do it.
I tend to go slow. I tend to that's just my personality. And there have been times in my life, like in a professional setting, and I'd be interacting with somebody with a faster personality, and they'd be like, would you just speed up? Like, would you talk a little faster? You know?
Yeah.
No.
I mean, I'm not even sure. Yeah.
Let me think about that. I'll get back to you once I've had time to process that.
Right. I mean, I even think there's all kinds of breathing stuff I'm supposed to be doing with that. Like when you taught us with the La ilaha illallah one, like you're breathing out one part and in on the other part, right?
Yeah. That's my favorite go-to, because that, for me, like that breathing sort of shifts. You're talking about the biochemistry and the neuroscience of the connection earlier. For me, the breathing that I associate with the exhale of La ilaha and the inhale of illallah, like that just sort of settles my system down. Like it soothes my nervous system. Yeah.
Right.
So I can do that whether I'm washing dishes
Right.
or whether I'm going to sleep or whether I'm driving. Like it's like that really helps my
Yeah.
connection, really. It's for me, it's brings together mind, body, heart, soul. Like it's a that's one of the things that I really love about chanting. And what we talked
Yes.
about as far as sound and light, it's not just words, it's not just meaning. There's a lot more going on. And if it changes the way we breathe, so
Right. Yeah, I
yeah.
just remembered another one that I use, an English one that I like English ones too, because sometimes I feel a disconnect from the language I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
even though I know what it means, it still feels different. And I
Yeah.
will use I don't know if this is legitimate or not, but the Ho'oponopono one, the I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. Are you familiar with that?
Can you say it? You said it so
It's
fast.
it's like Ho'oponopono. It's a Hawaiian thing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
apparently in Hawaii, they have like Ho'oponopono circles where they'll just get together for prayer. And
Uh-huh.
it's just, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you.
Oh,
And I will just, actually, that's one I use when I'm having a hard time falling asleep.
yeah.
I'll chant that one to myself. I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. That one is
Beautiful.
good for the English
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like I said, I'm not an expert in any of these, just a dabbler in all.
And you don't have to be an
Uh,
expert.
yeah.
I just applaud the fact that you are dabbling. So, yeah, one of my teachers said, depending on how you hold, you, basically how you hold things, like
Mm,
there's a way that if you're holding what you're doing with the intention of, like, my intention is to grow my sense of connectivity. My intention is to grow my inner light. And my intention in doing so is so I can basically share a sense of connection and light with others. Like, so this is my contribution to the world is basically through, and it might be through cooking, it might, be through
right.
dance, it might be through music, whatever. But it like this is what's yours that you're saying. You're with that when you're clear on your intention,
Yeah.
then there's a way that we can engage in things and be in different places and different modalities, um, that there can be a rightness to it without, if I
Yes.
may say so, if I
Yes.
like, yeah,
No, I think it's like a rightness for the moment because sometimes I'll go through different chants in a moment and I'm like, "Ugh, that one's not feeling right today." And so I'll
yeah,
pick another one. And I'll be like,
yeah,
okay, this one feels good today. For
yeah.
whatever reason, I don't know. But
And I think that's perfect because you're listening to yourself.
right,
You're
right,
noticing.
right,
To
right,
go back to
right.
the language you brought up earlier,
Yeah,
you're noticing and you're nurturing. You're saying,
yeah,
oh, what is it that settles my mind and grounds my body and
yeah,
nurtures my heart? And you're
yeah,
doing that. So
yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. Well, it has absolutely been a treat. Thank you for sharing what your experience is. It's very valuable to hear, and thank you for engaging in the conversation.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So, thank you for joining us on Beyond Names. Before we go, I invite you to take one breath and reflect for just one breath on what stayed with you from this conversation. I am enlivened. I love hearing how different people define or describe spirituality. So I love that you describe spirituality as connection. So that's something that's going to stick with me. So thank you.
Yeah.
May something you heard today help you reconnect with the light in your own heart. May you grow in compassion, clarity, and courage. May you find your way again and again back home to yourself, back home to the divine, however you name it. today's conversation spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it, leave a review, or reach out. Until next time, peace be with you. May you be light, may you carry light, and may you share your light.